Is it okay to lie to someone and withhold very important information for the sole reason being that you love someone and don't want to make things worse for them? This book seems to think so. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the strange and unusual books that I've found in my travels, and today it is quite a doozy. Today I am talking about a book that I found at my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They might have unhinged books like the one that I'm talking about today, and it's all about memory issues and mental health, among many other things. I am referring to Remember by Patricia Smith, which was published in 2019. For those who don't know, Patricia Smith is a fairly new author. This is the first book that she has written, and what a very interesting debut it is. I'll talk more about why that is later in the analysis section. But there's not a lot of information about Patricia out there, apart from what you can glean from their Twitter and Instagram pages. Patricia has dealt with mental health troubles in the past, and part of that is kind of written into this story a little bit. This isn't about Patricia's life. I certainly hope it isn't. That would indicate further issues and concerns to talk about. But there has been a number of mental health problems for Patricia that she's kind of talked about as she's gone through her road to recovery. It should also be noted that Patricia is a Black author. I picked out this book at random, but also I made sure to check out the author because it is Black History Month, and I wanted to talk about Black writers. And this is precisely, what we're doing, amplifying Black stories, regardless of whether they are good or not good. Yeah, without further ado, let's just talk about Remember and get through this weird book. I'll do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Remember focuses on a young woman named Portia Willows. The story begins in media res, as is fun to say, with Portia being questioned for something that happened to her pretty recently. There was an assault or something more serious that took place. We find out throughout the story. And it seems that Portia doesn't remember any of it. She's having some memory issues that stem from some trouble that she's had way back. We find out that she might have done something to her boyfriend, fiance, Ethan, and she also has a daughter that she wants to be able to see in order to be with her daughter, who she didn't know that she had. The story flashes back a couple of years and whatnot, and we find out that Portia had social anxiety when she was younger, but her mother didn't really want to handle it or deal with it, and just told her to get better and whatnot. And Portia is choosing to stay home from a theatrical play that in high school that her sister Piper is doing, and on the way to the play, Portia's mother and sister and father get into an accident. The mother and sister die, and the father seemingly survives. He falls into a deep depression, and Portia and her father kind of handle this by drinking beer and smoking cigarettes and just going about that. Eventually, Portia's able to graduate high school, and she makes it to UCLA, where she takes classes while sort of supporting her father, who have a mixed relationship because they're still grieving and haven't really dealt with the sadness that lies within them. But a short while later, a young man named Ethan shows up, and they develop somewhat of a relationship that gets more and more intimate, and he takes her virginity, and things are pretty groovy for them. Although the dad has some concerns for reasons that aren't quite clear. He just encourages her to be careful, but Ethan and her choose to pursue that relationship. Eventually, it reaches a point where Portia finds out that she is pregnant, and they consider getting an abortion, but they decide to keep it because they're adults and they feel they can handle that sort of thing. But as the pregnancy continues along, we see that Ethan has a number of doubts, and his father is trying to convince him to not stay in the relationship for reasons that, again, aren't really clear. But Ethan manages to, or decides to stay and raise the child with Portia. And Portia does give birth. She goes into labor, but she has a blackout and she can't recall giving birth when she does wake up. And people are concerned for her, but she does regain her memories and chooses to take care of the child. However, she also notes that her dad is missing and no one seems to care but her. And through asking a ton of questions, it's revealed that her dad has been dead this whole time and she has been hallucinating him. And people have just been going along with it, which is really weird and not at all how humans actually behave. And Portia doesn't know how to react to this. She panics and searches for her father, but she soon accepts it and prepares to deal with that trauma of knowing that her father has been dead this entire time. However, pretty soon she kind of wills her father back into existence, hallucination-wise, and her father just returns. And Ethan is very upset with this because she's giving into that delusion again. And Ethan eventually just decides to leave with Piper, living sort of down the street in an effort to give Portia time to still see Piper and hopefully recover from this mental illness that she's dealing with. However, as she spends less time with Piper, Portia just forgets that she has a child, and her father becomes a fixture in her life again. Eventually, the father's mother, Susan, comes along, who's been supporting the family this entire time, and she's alarmed that Portia has forgotten and just decides to contact Ethan and do something about Portia at this point because it's gone too far. She's forgotten her own daughter. As everyone's dealing with that, Ethan reveals that the reason that Portia's mother and father and sister died is because he was the drunk driver who crashed into them and wasn't held accountable. And he's very sorry, but he's fallen in love with her, which again is very bizarre, and I'll talk about that in the analysis section. As Portia sort of deals with this knowledge, she sees her father beat up Ethan with a baseball bat. It's sort of implied, or it's acknowledged that it's actually Portia doing this. And Ethan almost dies. He falls into a light coma, but he's able to recover. Portia is arrested, and they're trying to treat her and assess her if she's fit to stand trial. And they sort of help her come to understand all of this, and then she stands trial where they kind of try to or at least the prosecution tries to tear away at her case, arguing that she tried to murder Ethan, and everyone testifies for her, saying it was their fault and they should have acknowledged her mental health, but they chose to do nothing. And Ethan even admits that he still loves Portia, which is no, absolutely not. She tried to kill you, bro. But yeah, it's weird, but she's still found guilty for this attempted murder, and she knows that she's going to have to go to jail. The story then flashes 14 years in the future. Ethan and Portia are still talking. It's unclear if they're romantic or whatnot, but Portia is happy that Piper is able to have the life that she didn't have, and things seem to be going well, and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, what the hell kind of story is this? I should note that for the most part, through 200 pages of this story, it's bad. It's not very good. The writing is bad and the characterization is poor, and I'll talk about that in a few moments. But the only really interesting point is when it gets to its two big twist. which do not hold up and in fact kind of ruin the story even more. But there is something good that Patricia Smith does here. One of the things she's talking about is grief. Portia is in a prolonged stage of grieving due to her family's deaths. That happens sometimes. Psychologists note that grieving is a process, and if you experience something like a death or something, it takes some time to get over that, and grieving is normal. But when it reaches a point where it's a prolonged stage of grieving, 3 or so years after the fact, where Portia is drinking and smoking and numbing the pain in some way, that's when it becomes an actual problem. And she's choosing to express herself through the use of substances by avoiding thinking about the problem, avoiding confronting the pain that she's feeling inside, and isolation. Staying away from everyone. Even when she's with her imaginary father, she goes upstairs when he says something that she doesn't really like. And so she just tries to avoid any conflict. She even has social anxiety, which I'm realizing, after finishing reading the story, it's probably because if she didn't have social anxiety, Patricia would have had to have written Portia into the public setting, and when she talks about her father, people would have acted very strangely and just said unusual things about her. And so I feel like giving this character social anxiety was a tool to kind of hide things from the reader. But, the social anxiety and whatnot, it makes things worse for Portia. Isolating yourself from the world, especially when you're in a pain state, you need support. You need help from loved ones. And it's clear that Portia isn't getting that in this story. What's more is Ethan's love doesn't seem enough. I got to give Patricia credit for that. Ethan's love is not enough to get rid of the mental illness. It continues, and she needs support and even her own work. She needs to do self-work in order to get over or at least confront and resolve these issues that are going on for her. And usually in weaker stories, I would say that often it's the case that the love of another is enough to help you get over any humps that you're feeling, which is not how reality actually works. And I do like how Smith acknowledges that this can lead to further problems with memory, with substance use, post-traumatic stress, often leads to a forgetting. Especially the brain is really good at forgetting, but it can be a problem when you have prolonged periods of depression or post-traumatic stress and you just forget entire periods of your life. But also at the same time, while Patricia does a good point here, she's also making up stuff that she's kind of blending mental illnesses together to create, to allow for this story to occur. And I feel like that's not good. You can't portray mental health accurately in some regards and then just make things up in other regards. What are you, M. Night Shyamalan? Yeah, he did that with the Split movie. And I didn't particularly like that because, again, you're kind of stigmatizing mental illness when you inaccurately portray it. And so I although I do have to give Patricia credit, I have to take that away in some areas too. But the crux of this story, I feel, relies on the big twist. It turns out that the dead was dead the whole time, and that we have a case of the classic unreliable narrator. Wow. Where the way that Portia sees the world is not how it actually is. And that's an interesting twist, although it doesn't really make any sense because it relies on people not behaving like actual human beings. If someone was, talking to an imaginary person, surely you would say something. You wouldn't just allow them to continue. And it seems like Portia is talking to her father among Ethan, among other family members, as though he exists, and none of them are saying anything. None of them are trying to get her the help that she needs. And maybe that is a bit of a commentary on how we kind of leave people behind in that way. But also, no, I feel like people are much better at acknowledging this sort of thing. The story's kind of derailed by people not behaving like actual humans. And it also seems like Patricia kind of works backwards. She comes up with this amazing twist and then writes the rest of the story around it. And there's kind of glaring holes that indicate that. But if that was like the only part of the story, maybe you could be like, oh, that's interesting, haha, and move on. But it's not where Patricia Smith stops. Rather, she continues, and it's revealed that Ethan actually killed her family by accident, that he got drunk, which already makes him one of the worst people alive, and crashed into the mother, father, and sister, and they died. And so Ethan has been responsible and feeling guilt the whole time, and he ran into Portia and was like, wow, she's beautiful. Maybe I can help her with whatever she's dealing with. And that's not how people actually work. That's not how society works. Like, if you did a crime, you're never going to reach out to the person that you wronged. You're certainly not going to get yourself involved in that type of situation. So a lot of questions arise, like, why would Ethan lie and pursue this type of relationship? But more so than that, is it bad that Ethan did this? And the answer is yes, definitely. It's bad because this is kind of sexual assault. Ethan lied to Portia about who he was, misheld like truths about himself, and outright just indulged her mental illness. And then he had sex with her, and someone who's like mentally ill, like Portia, probably can't give her consent. It's really gray right there, or even outright bad, I would say. And then he just continued this along, and then he just revealed, like at the very end, like, oh, surprise, I'm actually the guy who killed your family by accident. And in that way, Portia's maybe right to try to beat him to death, because that's what he deserves. He lied to her this entire time. But also, like, even getting to that point, like, why does Ethan try this at all? What kind of human would pursue that if they weren't like some sort of monster just trying to get one over on people you've hurt? It really brings up a lot of questions about what Patricia sees, or why Patricia might see this as romantic. Because even after learning that he lied to you, like, Portia still wants to be in a relationship with him. And imagine, like, again, this is the second part, is like, imagine if the genders were reversed, where like a guy like tried to beat his girlfriend to death because he found out that she had killed his family. But more so than that, like, imagine if a girl said on trial, like, or like if they said like, oh, I still love him. That would sound pretty weird. So like, gender is doing a lot of work to hide the creepiness of this story. And, ultimately, why is everyone conveniently quiet? Why did no one in her family, why did none of the doctors, why did no one step in and say, hey, you're having a mental breakdown, let's get you help here? And like, sure, that would have made Portia unhappy, but it's better to make her unhappy and fix her problems then before you get into this situation and have those problems now. It just doesn't make any sense. It completely derails the story, and it creates some morally dubious aspects of the story in terms of the romance and in terms of why Patricia would do any of this and make it seem like Portia and Ethan have a decent relationship. They clearly do not. It's awful, and like, I wouldn't normally talk about this story because it was pretty bad. Like, the story was going nowhere until like 200 pages in, and then it gets to this bonkers point, and it creates a lot of weird claims. Like, the writing is awful, but it's just this twist really sticks out to me as something that somebody should have said, hey, no, you can't do that. That's too weird. This just ruins your entire story. I don't know. It just somebody should have stopped Patricia at some point. And that's not the only problem with this story. As I mentioned, like, Smith tries to have it both ways with mental health, saying, that people need to be taken care of, but at the same time, she demonizes mental health in a lot of ways. And also, just makes it seems like the underlying message is you can exploit people as long as you love them, especially the mentally ill. And that's not a good message. And no matter how much two people love each other, if one person can't really consent to the relationship and is being lied to by another person, that makes everything far worse. And the ending is too clean because it just, all these people admit to their guilt, which they probably would not do in real life. she's found guilty, and then the story just skips 14 years, doesn't really show any of the other struggles that she's dealing with, and her and Ethan have a somewhat positive relationship, and things are great with her daughter, even though her daughter witnessed some of the most horrifying things ever imaginable. So the ending is too clean and doesn't really match up with the horrific sort of aesthetic or horrific sort of themes of the rest of the story. And then again, the characterization is bad. I feel like we don't know enough about Portia, and what we do know is merely a setup for the twist. It's not really there for us to learn more about Portia. And the other characters are vague, and it's eventually revealed they were lying the whole time, so we don't know anything really too much. We don't know a lot about them. And I feel like a better writer would have focused more on the characters and instead of getting to that twist. It seems like Patricia spent so much time on the twist, she forgot about every other thing in the story, including making the writing feel fun and interesting rather than a snooze fest. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Remember by Patricia Smith. Absolutely bad. Probably one of the worst stories that I've ever read, not only in my reading life, but also for this channel. You might wonder, why did I choose to talk about the story that I hated for so long? And I feel it's because of the twist. If it had simply been what it was in the beginning with a go nowhere story, I'd probably just forget about it. But I'm going to remember this story, for quite some time because of the choices that Patricia made and the underlying messaging that may or may not have been intentional that come out of it. So, I encourage you to never read this, but if you want to go and read it just to experience that twist for yourself, I encourage you to do so. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this story or this author. Hopefully, Patricia writes more in the future that is less harrowing in a way, and actually structured in a better manner. Perhaps she'll go on to write some more quality books if she still has a writing career. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and memory forgotten travels. Farewell.